Hi, this is Tutor Nick P, and this is lesson 31. Today we're going to look at the difference between hall and corridor. All right, it's good to note right to begin with that there are some situations where you could have a long passageway that could refer to either one. But I'm going to try to give you little hints where it's more likely we use one word rather than the other word. Okay, let's first take a look at the definition. Um, and it's also important to note that we're focusing on the difference between hall and corridor when it refers to a long passage, with rooms that it goes into. Because there are other meanings of hall and there are other meanings of corridor. But let's start. Let's take a look here. Our first hall. Hall often sometimes could be called a hallway too. It's a little more informal, but it's common. A lot of people will say either hall or hallway. Okay, it means a long room inside a house, apartment, or building that leads to other rooms and sometimes to a stairway. That's our general meaning of a hall. Okay. All right. Here's where we're going to have a slight difference. A hall could have no doors on either side of the wall. It could have doors only on one side of the wall, or it could have doors on both sides. All right. Later, we find out with corridor that usually most dictionaries think that corridor should have doors on both sides of the walls. So there's this difference. There's one difference right there. All right. So let's take a look here. A hall or a hallway is used more often in houses and apartments. Um, yeah. Of course, I've lived in different houses in my life. I remember when I was young, as soon as we got it through the front door, there was the living room was on the side, and then there was a short hallway that really only led into the kitchen. You didn't really have many doors. Maybe you only had doors on one side. You didn't have doors on both sides, right? And if you went upstairs, there was another hallway, and it was an attached house, so they could only have doors on one side. The other side was a wall because that was the wall of a person who lived next door who also had a house that was attached. So hallways you find this way. You find them in houses. You find them in apartments. I remember when I was in college, I lived in an apartment where you walked in and there was a hallway right away. And there was only rooms on one side. There was a bathroom, and then there was a kitchen, and then it led into the living room. And on this side, it was only a wall because that was the wall of the person who lived in the apartment next door. So in that case, we're a little more likely to say hall or hallway. Okay. And again, you only have rooms on one side. Okay, so it's more often used apartments, and it's, all right, let's take a look at the next hint. Schools. Yeah, schools like the word hall more than they do corridor. So schools tend to prefer the word hall. It is not unusual to hear a teacher made a student who behaved badly stand out in the hall. This is probably in the low grades, of course. This is probably in elementary school. Maybe as a punishment, the teacher told the student to go out and stand out in the hall. And I don't ever remember hearing the teacher say, go out and stand out in the corridor. In this case, schools tend to use the word hall. All right, here's some other hints to that. I behave badly, stand out in the hall, you may require. Yeah, a student who behaved badly, stand out in the hall. Yeah, some schools may require a student to get a hall pass. I don't hear it as much anymore. But there was a time where maybe they wanted to make sure, like, some student wasn't trying to cut class, snuck out of the class. The teacher didn't see them. So if you got caught in a hall, maybe you needed this piece of paper that gave written permission from a teacher. That was a hall pass. We didn't say corridor pass. We said hall pass. You might have heard, again, I don't know how often this is used anymore, but I remember there was a time there might have been a hall monitor. There'd be somebody who watched to make sure that students didn't just go out and wander in the halls. Sometimes it was actually even another student who was trusted more to watch the halls. But again, they didn't use the word corridor there. So schools tend to like the word hall more. Very good. All right, so I gave some common examples here. You need to pass through the hallway to get to the kitchen. All right, this would be like in an apartment. Um, Leave the broom and dustpan in the hall. Yeah, again, sounds like a house or apartment. Students need to line up in the halls to switch classrooms. So again, definitely in schools, definitely more in private homes, houses, apartments. Probably hall is more common. Um, Corridor. A long passage inside a building with doors on each side. Yeah, as I researched it, most dictionaries tend to agree with this sort of idea that there should be doors on both sides in order to be called a corridor. Maybe that's why we tend to use it in more formal buildings. So, all right, corridor, side. All right. Another thing to note that might actually even throw it off a little bit because this is usually only has openings on one side, is in a railway carriage. The passage inside a railway carriage is also called a corridor. If you've ever been to Europe, you walk through that little passageway and they have little booths, little cars where people go in and sit down. That would be referred to as a corridor in that situation. So on trains or long distance trains, not like subways or something like that. So we say corridor. So the passage inside a railway carriage, also called a corridor. When inside buildings, corridor tends to be more formal and may more often be used in hotels. Yeah, a lot of hotels definitely try to make use of space, and usually when you get off the elevator, there'll be rooms on this side, there'll be rooms on that side. So it's more formal. You're more likely to hear the word corridor in like a hotel. Hospitals, the same thing. Usually, if you go to hospital, there's the area in the center, and there may be rooms on this side and rooms on that side. So you're more often likely to hear corridor in this situation. Like I said, there's always a chance that somebody might use the word hall, but this is where corridor is more often heard. Office buildings, public buildings, etc. Okay, and we give some examples. That X-ray technician wheeled this patient in a wheelchair through the corridor. Um, through the corridor to get to the elevator. Maybe you had to go to another floor to take an X-ray. So he probably went to the room with the wheelchair, made the patient sit in the wheelchair, and wheeled them out of the room into the corridor, basically. Okay, good. Okay, another one. This one's probably in a hotel. You can leave your room service tray outside your hotel room door in the corridor. Uh, yes, room service will come by later to retrieve it, pick it up, bring it back. Yeah, so again, this is another situation where corridor might be more common. Okay. It is also important to note that both hall and corridor have other meanings that could confuse students. A hall sometimes could refer to a whole building or a very large room. Yeah, sometimes at universities on a campus, some of their dormitory rooms may be referred to as a hall, or they'll have like a name and then a hall, and call it hall, some type of hall. Like which dormitory do you live in? Oh, I live in this hall, and then it may have a name with the hall, so you know which one. So that's one way that could kind of throw students off because it really refers to a whole building here. And I think they say in some old castles, if they had a big room, sometimes that was referred to as a hall. But again, that's a whole big room. That's not just like a thin or a longer passageway. So it's a little different. What else do we say? Okay, so few students will sometimes refer to a whole building or a very large building. For example, in colleges, like I just mentioned, concert halls aren't concert hall, lecture halls. In this case, it refers either to very, very large rooms inside the building, or sometimes the whole building is referred to that way. In these situations, hall is referring to buildings or large rooms in buildings, not long passageways that is similar to corridor. So it's different in this situation. Corridor and hall is similar when they're referred to as like the longer, thin, narrow passageway between buildings with rooms, or that lead to other rooms. All right, so I hope that helps, because this is one where you could get people argue a little bit. There might even be a slight difference between American English and British English here too, but I focus more on the American English usage here. Okay, thank you for your time. I hope that clarifies it.